Three, two, one, boom! And we're in whānau. Well, welcome to hashtag the glass half full. Have I got a character for you today? This person, we met after I'd gotten to know his old man quite well, my man Ollie Such. And since I've met him, uh, real focus. Dude knows where he's going now. Know how he's going to get there, and yeah, really inspires me in multiple ways in multiple areas. So, without further ado, Ollie, if I can get you just introduce yourself, that'd be awesome, my man.
100%. Thank you so much for the intro, man. I love the energy. I was a little bit taken off guard by the whoop bam. I was like, oh shit, here we go.
I like it.
I'm Ollie. I'm the GM of Backbone Marketing and the co-founder of Six Figure Secrets. Backbone's the key focus for us at the moment. We're a creative-led, performance-based agency. We basically, the goal for us is we find ways to tie our revenue or our financial outcomes to our clients' financial outcomes, so that we only grow when we help them grow. So it's all performance-based marketing. That's the core of the business that we're in.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. And I suppose the reason that I've got Ollie on here is I don't know if you see Ollie around much on LinkedIn, but I always love the perspectives that he is giving on the topics that he's talking about, and they're not your usual perspectives. And with the glass half full, what we'll sort of like to do in this business is talk about the not so good stuff, not the shining lights, and not all the Instagram, my life is perfect kind of stuff. We like to sort of get into some of the nitty gritty, some of the bad stuff that you might have experienced, whether it be in your personal life, in your business life. And then we try to sort of understand what that journey looked like for you and see if we can get any lessons on the other side. And I suppose the reason that I sort of started interviewing people was I can only talk about myself in so many different ways before it becomes like a broken record of people going, man, well, this guy just shut up. And so I wanted to get more interesting people on here to talk about their things or their issues. And why not have an interesting person like yourself? So Ollie, once again, I'll hand it back to you just to give us some insight into a little journey or a situation that you've been through and see where we end up from there, my man.
Cool, man. I got to level with you, T. I almost cancelled this meeting because I was feeling so uncomfortable about telling the story. And interestingly, it's something I've come to grips with and have gotten over it, but it's primarily only the people within my inner circle who know me quite well, who I've ever told the story to. And so the thought of it going out into the internet and having anybody be able to look at it, I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. But then I was like, man, like it makes me uncomfortable, therefore it's the right thing to do. So might as well do it. I was about 20 years old, and I'll compact this down as far as possible. I could talk to you about it for 40 minutes, but I'll keep it nice and tight for the audience. I was about years old when I got into a relationship with a woman who will not be named, who was much, much older than me. She was about 35, 36, and I was about 20. And it started out as just a one-night stand, and then turned into some ongoing one-night stands, casual sex, which slowly then over time morphed into a relationship. There was no like, will you be my girlfriend? It was very subtle, and it happened over time. And suddenly 9 months later, we're like, oh, I guess we're in a relationship. And she moved to Auckland for me. She moved away from her home city in New Zealand. And all was pretty good. It was a good relationship. She was an awesome woman. Like I was in love with her at the time. And the relationship slowly started to become toxic. And the context of that doesn't really matter so much for the context of this conversation, but it started turning toxic over time. And it took me about a year or so to finally build up the courage to realize that it was toxic. We were going in different directions, and that I wanted to break up with her. And so I did it. I sat her down and said, we're going in different directions. It's been fun, but we're in different stages of life. I'm out. And she was like, okay. She kind of understood, but also was unbelievably angry at this point. And then over the coming month to 2 months after that, I received between 100 to 200 messages text messages a day and multiple calls ranging anything from I love you, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, please take me back, to fuck you, you absolute piece of shit, I'm going to take down your business. I just started my first business at the time. I'm just going to tear your whole world apart. And I made the poor decision to stay in contact with her to help like just wean off the relationship from both parties. And that was a terrible decision to not fully cut off. And so, you know, this was just messaging every single day, like just between the mixture of on the full spectrum of hate and love and everywhere in between. And that went on for about another 2 months. So we're talking probably 3 to 4 months total of this. And then at which point I was so emotionally and mentally drained and just broken, because I was now still in a relationship technically, but not getting any of the benefits. And it was just pure hate and anger and ill intent both ways. I was also complicit in this. I was also throwing a lot of shade back.
Yeah.
Because I had no emotional regulation at that point. I finally decided that I needed to block her on all platforms so she couldn't contact me at all. The only platform that I think you can't block on is email, so she could still email, but everything else is blocked. So I sat her down and said, that's what's happening. I can't do this anymore. And she told me that if I did that and I blocked her, she'd kill herself. And she would write like a suicide note, basically saying that I was the reason that all of that would happen, and I was to blame, and that basically all of her family, all of my family, all of my friends would know that I was the one who effectively pulled the trigger. And I was too young and naive to even think twice or consider calling that bluff. And so I had no other choice but to not cut her off. And then over the coming few months, naturally it ended up back in a relationship. I was just completely broken. And interestingly, I ended up getting to a point where I was so broken that I saw no way out. I literally thought I was going to have to stay with her for the rest of my life. So I convinced myself that it was okay, and that I still loved her, and that I would make it work.
Yeah.
I genuinely, because I didn't see another way out. So I convinced myself that I was going to make it work, and that I'd like start buying her flowers, do nice things, even though this woman had threatened to kill herself and blame me. And that went on for probably another 9 months to a year, at which point the same cycle went back around. It got really toxic again, exhibited all the same behaviors from both ends. And I realized that the only option that I had was to tell her that I was going to break up with her, that I was going to cut her off. And I knew that I'd have to face the fact that she was probably going to tell me that she was going to, it's the same thing, that she was going to kill herself and blame me. And I would have to call her bluff on that. And it took me a good probably 2 or 3 months to build up the courage to do it, and then ended up sitting her down and basically said, I'm out, I can't do this anymore, I'm blocking myself, I'm blocking you basically out of my life. And as was expected, she said, well, if you're going to do that, I'll take my own life, and I'm going to write a note and everybody's going to know. And I said, cool, let's do it. Like, I'll buy you the gun, I'll get you the pills, how do we need to do it? And I called the bluff, and that removed all the power. And it became very clear that it was just a tactic, and it was a maneuver, and she was never going to do it. She'd never consider doing it. Ultimately, what she ended up saying was she loved me too much to do anything like that, but it was like a desperation tactic to keep me in.
For sure.
And so naturally I lost my shit even more at that. But it was interesting because my whole life up until that point, and especially in the situation, had often been the victim and blamed other people. And even in the relationship itself, I blamed her for everything. I didn't take responsibility for anything. As much as she was certainly at fault, I was at least 50% at fault for all the toxicity, all the anger, all the screaming, and at least 50% accountable and at fault for getting it to the point that it was. But I never saw that at the time. I blamed her for literally everything and thought I was this perfect young kid who knew everything and was just a great partner and a great boyfriend and just a great dude. Wake up. So to put it, and like I was broken. It took like just physically, mentally and emotionally broken for a wee while after that. It took me a lot of therapy sessions and a lot of time to come to grips with it, and I'm totally okay with it now. Like no resentment, no nothing. But to bring it to the glass half full, because that's the glass half empty, that's the situation. What did it teach me? Number one, this was the turning point for me around where I realized that I was responsible for everything in my life. And that actually, as much as she was certainly at fault and there were behaviors that she exhibited, there were things that she did and said that played a big part, ultimately it's totally on me. Like, you know me, because you know me quite
Mm.
well. The thing I talk about more than anything else is full ownership and accountability. Like, everything in your life is 100% on you, and you have nobody else to blame other than you. And this was the situation that taught me that,
Yeah.
because I realized, as much as she played a part, actually, this was, every little part of it was on me. So this was the big turning point for me, where I just went, everything is my fault. And
Mm.
but positively, not blame, not like, oh, you're to blame, it's your fault, but like, it's actually really uplifting and quite freeing and liberating to realize that I was in the position I was in solely because of me. It wasn't because of her. She played her part, but I led her to, I backed her into a corner where she had no other choice but to play the role that she did. So that was the like full accountability piece to me. And then the other thing that it taught me was that there are no good or bad decisions. It's only how you deal with the consequences of a decision. So what
Mm.
do I mean by that? Inherently, to be in a relationship with her at the time was actually a really good thing. Like, we got on really well, we shared similar values, we had similar goals at that time. And so that was a good decision. Where I fucked up was when I decided that the relationship no longer served me or her. Instead of moving quickly to break it off, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything, and I waited and waited and waited and hoped it would get better, but didn't take any responsibility. And I hoped that she would change, but I never changed. And so what I realized was, it wasn't so much the decision not to leave her, or the decision to leave her, or any decision, but it's actually how I dealt with the consequences of the decision that made it good or bad. Because ultimately, the fact that the relationship turned toxic wasn't as a result of a good or bad decision to get into a relationship. It was a result of not dealing with the consequences of that decision. And so for me now, it's empowered me in so many ways. Like, I don't struggle to make decisions, even relatively big decisions now.
Yeah.
I listen to my gut, I listen to my instinct. I don't have to think too logically. I'll justify a decision I've made logically so that my brain goes where my gut and my heart are.
Yeah.
But I can make a pretty big life-changing decision relatively quickly, because I know that there's no such thing as a good or bad decision. Moving to
Yeah.
Australia or America isn't good or bad. The only thing that makes it good or bad is how you deal with the consequences, positively or negatively, of that decision, that ultimately determine if it's good or bad.
I'm gonna go back to where I sort of first started reading back. You're 20 years old. Are you 20 years old?
Yeah.
You're 20 years old. And you talk about no responsibility at 20, no regulation at 20. I jump in my mind at 20 and I think about what I was doing at 20. Yep, I feel like I was on that same boat. So, what were you on the port side while I was on the starboard side?
I think so,
Oh,
man. I No doubt. We would have looked at each other on each side and gone, hey, what's happening, man? And I was such a victim of life. Like, for someone I was very driven at that stage. I took no responsibility for anything. Like, all of
yeah,
the wins I took responsibility for. When something went well, I was like, Ollie, you're a freaking rock star, man. You rock. And when something went badly, I was like, oh, nah, man. Like, like, from a sporting standpoint, that wasn't
yeah,
my fault. That was the team's fault, or that was the winger's fault,
yeah,
or like,
yeah.
it was just everybody else's fault other than mine. But all the good stuff was nobody else's but mine. And it just is a broken way to live.
So this actual journey with this other person, if I look at the timelines and I just wrote down, you're probably looking at about a year and a half in total, or just somewhere around about a year.
It would
The
have
initial
actually,
6 months, and then
oh, no, it probably ended up being just over 2
just
in
over.
the end. I might have had the time frame slightly wrong, because what's interesting is the detail of like, what's really crazy is my brain, up until I managed to finally get over the situation, my brain shut out all the details of it. Like, once it had happened, once the situation was over, and before the 3 to 4 years of healing happened, like, I couldn't tell you any of the details of it. My brain was just like, you've had this traumatic
Yeah,
experience,
yeah,
and it just shut off all memories of it.
yeah.
And I was like, oh, I guess this is in the past. And then I saw all of these behaviors that I exhibited showing up in my day-to-day life, that were all a result of this experience. And it was mainly how I treated women after that experience, because I ended up treating them pretty poorly for the most part, because I didn't want to get hurt again. So I ended up treating them badly so that it was never me who got hurt.
Yeah. And your process in owning it, because I've only ever met the Ollie that has owned everything. You just own it through and through. Was that pivotal into you getting to that point where you're, now I own this problem? Was that the one thing, or was there a multitude of other things that you reflected on and going, oh, was that the main driver that put you into this ownership, accountability?
That was like at least the 80-20.
Yeah.
There are no doubt some further things after that point, but that I don't want to use the word pivot, but we'll say pivotal. that was the pivotal point for me that led me from no responsibility, complete victimhood, no accountability, to realizing that like all the positions that I was in, the fact that I wasn't making enough money, the fact that I wasn't building the business that I wanted, the fact that I wasn't in the relationship I wanted, everything in my life was ultimately as a result of me and under my responsibility.
And I suppose for me, the times when I have taken that ownership and that accountability and owned it, for me, I've always felt that knowing that it's me means that, oh, I have complete control over this. I just need to, and I'm able to formulate ways to solve my problems quite quick at the times that I own it. Is that sort of similar for you as well?
100%. Like for me, and I can only speak for me, there's nothing less liberating than thinking that somebody else has control of your life, or that something else is in control of a situation in your life. And it's so counterintuitive, because our desire, or my desire, to blame people, what I was trying to do was gain more control and make myself feel okay. The blame game is always a desire to internally make yourself feel okay and just like be able to relax. But what I came to realize was the thing that made me relax and feel calm and okay was realizing that it was actually all on me.
Yeah.
But it's super counterintuitive, because normally you think responsibility and taking fault is like, oh man, it's all on me. How could I have screwed this all up? But it's like, no, man, because it means you can fix it all. Like, Ollie, you can go and fix it all. If I think that Tia Mecca is the person who is in control of me and is the reason I'm unhappy, how could I ever be happy if I think that it's always you who's the one who's breaking me, you know?
Yeah. And then just that last bit, like with the no good or bad decisions, and just like knowing that regardless of what the decision is made, whatever the consequence might be, and your perspective will determine that being positive or negative, it's how you deal with that and make your next steps that actually, will determine sort of your outcomes and how you're going to keep on progressing. And once again, giving you more ownership of the situation and knowing that you have more control. So yes, there's going to be something out of your control, but to regain that control that you might need or might not need, you have ways or a mechanism to get back to that through that good or bad decision, however you look at it.
That's it, man.
I've never looked at it like that.
Like the perfect example is the couple who got married when they were 25, and they no doubt would have been madly in love. They were together for 3 or 4 years. They were madly in love. And then at some point, 6 months after the marriage, maybe 5 years after the marriage, the love fizzled. They were going in different directions. Maybe it was that someone did something silly, or they just like naturally fell out of love and drifted different ways. But then from there, they spent the next 20 years together. What they'll do in their heads is they'll end up saying, well, I made a bad decision. I married the wrong person.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you didn't make a bad decision. There was no good or bad decision to marry that person. Where you went wrong was you realized 3 years later you shouldn't have been with them, and you should have cut that then and there. Instead, you decided not to do anything, and you left it for 15 years.
Yeah.
And then blamed the decision, when really it's not the decision, it's the fact that you left it 15 years that was the problem.
Yeah. Whew. I'm gonna tuck that one in my back pocket there, Jedi Master. Oh, geez. Well, Ollie, thank you so much for that story. I never know what's gonna come at me, and I didn't anticipate that. So
My pleasure, man.
thank you so much. And as always, thank you for your time. I always respect your time. I know that you're busy. I know that you've got things to do, and just really appreciate the bloody insight and that last point, because that was a real good one, and you have actually helped me solve the problem that I had been stewing on for a week and a half, and it's once again it's all me. But no, thank you so much, bro. I really appreciate it. And if people are looking to reach out to you or get a hold of you, how can they go about doing that?
Facebook or LinkedIn would be the best way. Search Ollie, Ollie Such on Facebook, and same thing on LinkedIn. Connect with me, add me as a friend. Always happy to chat. Love meeting new people and talking about all this kind of stuff. So that would be the easiest way. And thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it, and I hope it's helped at least one other person as well.
Now, awesome. Awa whānau, that's a glass half full out. Boom!